My name is Marco Lang. I'm responsible for visual configuration as a product manager here at Tacton. In my presentation today, I like to talk about 3 areas. The first one is, why should you get started looking into visual configuration? What can you actually do with visual configuration, and how is it done, and how can you get it? So let's look into the first topic. Maybe you recognize some of those pains in your sales process. It's really hard to get confidence on both sides, the buying and the selling side, that this is the right configuration to solve the problem. And it often requires intense alignment efforts. Especially design decisions can be very time-consuming to clarify them if you don't have the correct visualization at hand. And in a digital sales process, you're missing physical samples to provide information about visual aspects of your product. It's also very hard to upsell additional options and functionalities if you can show them. Especially spatial or geometrical configuration is also quite complex if you only have text-based UIs, which also tend to get very exhausting after some time if you keep answering questions after questions. Returns that only happen because of simple misunderstandings and misaligned expectations are pretty frustrating. And it's not even hard for buyers to understand your complex portfolio, but also for your sales staff, especially new ones, if they need to understand the portfolio and how the different products differentiate. So we think that visual configuration can help you solve or mitigate some of those pains. So that's a quick peek into visual configuration. It's a nice marketing video, but of course the question still remains, how can visual configuration actually help to solve those pains? If we look at the value proposition for visual configuration, we see that there are different use cases where you can use visual configuration, especially in the configuration process, but also in the quotation part. not so much in the pricing, of course. And we are typically talking about 6 different values when it comes to visual configuration. So increasing speed of the sales process because it's getting easier and faster to align, reducing cost by reducing misunderstandings, increase order size because it's easier to upsell if you can visualize additional functionalities and options, increase conversion and win rates because confidence on both sides is improved, increase satisfaction of the whole sales process, and increase engagement for very complex sales processes. And typically, you can achieve all those values in the different use cases. Also, it's important to understand that you can only achieve all those values if the visualization or the visual configuration is exposed to the end consumer, the one who's buying. As long as the visualization is used only internally, it could also bring tremendous value, but all of the values can only be achieved by making it available to the buyer. Bottom line, what you see is what you get. That's still the topic. But of course, do we have any proof of those values that we are claiming? And what you can actually do if you want to have some proof, you could ask people or organizations who have specific expertise and knowledge and are willing to share that. And one of them is, for example, you can reach out to analysts like, for example, Gartner. An interesting report that Gartner makes available every year is the Hype Cycle for Digital Commerce. That's a screenshot of this year's report. So if you look at that hype cycle, which is showcasing interesting industry trends and things you should look into, there is no mentioning of visual configuration. But it's very easy to explain because visual configuration just left the hype cycle this year. It was part of it last year and the years before and went from left to right. But this year is the first year where it's not part anymore because Gartner does not consider it anymore as a hype. It has now reached the productivity level. So if we look at last year's report, we find we can find quite a bit of information about visual configuration, that it's considered table stakes capability according to Gartner. And they are also listing quite a few of those benefits, values that you can get, which map quite nicely to the ones in our value proposition. And Gartner recommends to be an early adapter and to gain competitive advantage by utilizing visual configuration. All right, so, but still, do I have some numbers to back that up? And it's not easy to get numbers to specifically pinpoint the value of visual configuration because typically visual configuration is not introduced standalone. Either it's part of the introduction of a CPQ in the first place, or when it's introduced, it's coming with a lot of other enhancements to CPQ. So it's not so easy, but I have a couple of other numbers that I can share. If we're looking at our current business at Tacton, we see that 31%, so nearly a third of all Tacton CPQ customers have visualization licenses at the moment. 50% of those are already live with visual configuration or currently in an onboarding state. Why is it not 100%? That has various reasons, but one of the reasons is that it can make sense to defer visual configuration to later project phase if you want to get the C, the P, and the Q part right in the first place and then add additional capabilities. What we're also seeing is that if customers start with a end customer facing sales approach first, like self-service or lead generation, then visual configuration is always part of the first project implementation phase. So looking at the customers that have visualization and are already live in production, we were looking at the last 30 days. We see we had around 7,100 visualization sessions and 4,600 screenshot requests, meaning requests for images to be put into proposal documents. If we look at our new sales, we see that visual configuration is the third most requested functionality. The first one is CRM integration, the second one is ERP integration, and then visual configuration. Among all the CPQ options that we sell, it's number one. And if we look at this year, the CPQ deals that our own sales force won, we see that 50% of those deals included visualization. So the number of 31% having visualization in our customer base is definitely going up. All right, so another question that I hear a lot is, but how does it fit in our process? Manufacturing companies, we are not the visualization specialists, so how does that fit into our day-to-day business? And I think it can fit quite nicely, because if we look at the traditional product life cycle that we are all in, it starts with the design phase, then we have the building phase, and then at the end we are going to operate everything. And along those different phases, we already see that visualization plays quite an important role. Especially in the design phase, we are using CAD systems, 2D, but nowadays mostly 3D CAD. We are creating first digital prototypes and digital twins to do verification and simulations. Then in the building phase, we are utilizing that data produced in design to create production digital twins along the physical product that is produced, typical many drawings, but also 3D data. And then finally, in the operate phase, we, or some of you may already working with performance digital twins, connecting the physical, the real products with the digital ones. And 3D data is most often part of that as well. Maybe you're also experiencing with remote services or remote maintenance by using augmented or mixed reality devices to improve services. So visualization is already playing a part along the product lifecycle, but since we are at the Tacton Summit here, we know that an important phase is missing, which is the selling phase. So we as Tacton, we provide two products here. One is design automation, which is more targeting the build and the design phase, and we have Tacton CPQ for the selling phase. And within Tacton CPQ, we have two visualization offerings. One is called visual configuration and the other one CAD automation. And both are utilizing data that is produced in the design and engineering phase, supporting the sales process. And after that, we can also use the results of those visualization tools to support the further steps like the build or the operation step. So visualization as such, I think, fits quite nicely into a general product lifecycle. So now let's take a look at the what. So what can you do with visual configuration? So visual configuration, first of all, is omni-channel capable, meaning it can support all different sales channels for the configuration, the buying channels like lead gen, self-service, as well as the selling channels, partner, direct sales, and it supports the quotation process. That's only one dimension. The other dimension is it's also from a technical perspective omni-channel, meaning it can be used on all different kinds of devices, desktop, PCs, mobile devices, laptops, smartphones, tablets, whatever. It doesn't matter, it runs on all those different devices. It's omni-product. And what I mean with that is that you can visualize any kind of product from any kind of industry, from very small products of a few centimeters to products that are several hundred meters wide. Our visualization technology is able to support you in all those different cases. What you can also see is that we support different visual fidelities, so from very low end to very high end. So I call that omni-fidelity. So on one side of the spectrum, you have the most simple visualization, which is a white piece of paper. And then you have just a two-dimensional drawing on that one. And on the other end of the fidelity spectrum, you have a real photograph of the product in reality. And in between, you have that wide spectrum. So from 2D to 3D CAD to going to a simple real-time visualization, adding a few colors. Then you're making everything more photorealistic, and then coming over to virtual photography, which is already very close to the real photography. And our visual configuration capabilities are focusing on the real-time part of that spectrum here. And within that box visual configuration, we have our own spectrum of visual fidelity. So on the far left side of our box, we can make it look like 3D CAD, just getting the CAD data converted in a file format that we can use, and then it will look like the CAD data. And on the far right side of our little box here, we can make it photorealistic, coming closer to virtual photography, but of course not completely the same. So it's basically a decision for our customers or within a project to define what kind of fidelity are we looking at. We can use visual configuration to visualize individual products, but also complete systems. So system configuration can also be extended with visual configuration, in that case to visualize that bottle feeder line. But that small image here is actually a bit misleading because it's showcasing something that has actually not been defined with the system yet. Because the system tells us what individual components or nodes are part of the system, and it may also tell us how those nodes are connected using the different ports of a node in a system. But it's definitely not telling us the layout of that system, so how those individual nodes are positioned in relationship to each other. And that's actually an important question when doing system configuration. Sure, knowing that it is correct system and understanding what are the individual parts of the system, but the question in the end remains, how does it fit into the available space that I have, typically a already existing building? So we need to somehow lay out that system and understand if it will fit in the available space. And this is why we developed a new capability, which is called layout planning, which allows us during configuration to upload floor plans of existing environments and buildings, putting our system on top of that, and try to verify if the system will fit into the available space, if I need to adjust it, rearrange it, maybe reconfigure it. So in the end, the system will fit into the available space. So we are enabling sales rep to already create a first rough layout on their own without the need of involving engineering, CAD tools or CAD knowledge. And that will speed up the whole process and makes it more cost efficient if engineering can be brought into that whole sales process much later, when there already is a good confidence together between sales and the buyer that we are on the right track, and this is the system that we want to go for. That was the what. Now let's have a brief look into how. So the first question is how does it work setting up visual configuration? So it's typically a 4-step workflow. The first step is gathering all the reference data. So typically the reference data is coming from the design and engineering department in your company. 2D CAD drawings, 3D data, or further reference materials or photographs. That's the first step to gather all the required data, so we know how that product works and how it looks like. The next step is then to create so-called visual assets out of that reference data. So this is coming back to that visual fidelity spectrum. So defining how should the visualization look like, and then depending on that, investing more or less effort in making the visualization look photorealistic or not. The third step I haven't talked so much about is creating the visual logic. That has 2 parts. The first part is defining the assembly, so how the individual visual assets are connected to each other to build up the final product. And then connecting that knowledge to the product model, to the configuration logic to define, okay, if we have a certain configuration change, how is the visualization impacted of that? And the last step is then the UI integration. So the question, which are the different use cases you want to use the visualization in the different sales channels, and then integrate the visualization there. So coming to my last slide, to the question, how do I get it? Tacton CPQ offers a wide range of options or option areas. And as I already mentioned, 2 of them are in the area of visualization. So when do you choose CAD automation? CAD automation you choose if you want to get CAD files or engineering drawings after the configuration is done. And visual configuration you use when you require visualization support during the configuration, and or extended proposals with images if you like to add images of the configured product into your proposal. But there's also another important difference between CAD automation and visual configuration, because visual configuration is not only one option, it's actually an option area, and we actually provide 2 different options that you can buy when it comes to visual configuration. And both of those options, they have the same basic functionality. So allowing you to create a 3D real-time visualization of your product, use that during your configuration, and create screenshots or images of that product to add them in proposals. That functionality is something that both options have in common. But then they add specific functionality on top that is tailored to specific use cases. So the visualization option, or the option called visualization, should be used if you want to achieve a high visual fidelity, going along that photorealism on that fidelity spectrum. And those capabilities are only available in that option. The other option, called layout planning, that option adds additional interactivity to the visualization, so you can use drag and drop to select objects in the visualization, to move them around, place them, and then sending that information back to the configurator for further adjustments if necessary. And also, of course, uploading floor plans as support for that layouting process. And those capabilities are only available in the option layout planning. Both options are independent, so they don't require each other. You can buy them individually, or if you have a very complex and broad portfolio, you may require both. So some products maybe use the photorealistic approach, and others are more looking into that interactivity. And that's it. Thank you for your time. That was visual configuration for Tacton CPQ.